So it quite possibly could. There could be some great recommendations that come out of it to make our government a little bit smaller.
Well, $2 trillion, of course, is a lot smaller. And I wonder if this falls into the category of a lot of things involving Donald Trump, that the opening salvo is just that. And that at some point there will be maybe some spending cuts that they can take credit for. Is that how this goes?
Yeah, and so how this process is all going to play out is initially the DOGE is going to be set up as an advisory committee. And I think your prior guest talked a little bit about this. And so it will be set up as an advisory committee to OMB, and it will provide recommendations as the president puts forward his budget for 2026.
So how does it play out then when it comes time to actually crafting a budget? I mentioned the stopgap. We're going to go through this kicking the can. But at some point, likely by March, I think is the conventional wisdom on Capitol Hill, there will be a budget crafted, dare I say, using regular order, but I don't want to get too crazy here, but will actually have Donald Trump's fingerprints on them. Is that how he implements what we hear from Musk and Ramaswamy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this advisory committee will make recommendations to OMB, and ultimately it'll be up to the president and OMB to put together a budget proposal that they'll send up to Capitol Hill, and then it's up to lawmakers, right, to craft a budget and to go through the appropriations process. And so, hard to say at this point, which recommendations will be taken into account. And it may be some recommendations are held back or further developed as they look at other budget spending proposals like a tax bill. Maybe you save some of the proposals for that exercise.
Sure. That was really the genesis of this, right? When the idea of extending or making permanent the Trump tax cuts came about, everyone cried deficit spending, bigger deficits, maybe higher inflation. And then we heard this idea about the DOGE. Is it the answer to higher deficits?
Well, it's certainly part of a process to pay for the tax bill, right? Is looking for ways to cut spending as an offset to cutting those taxes. It will cost, in order to extend all of the 2017 expiring provisions, it's going to cost a net number of $4.6 trillion. And so hopefully you can use some government savings to pay for that process and the extension of those tax cuts.
Do you believe Donald Trump actually wants to cut spending? Did his first administration show us a pattern there?
Oh, absolutely. I think that people are looking for real change. They're looking to see our economy expand, to create jobs. And so I do think that they are going to be looking at cutting government spending. And as I said before, I think that it'll be part of just the general budget process, and we could see some of those additional cuts appear as part of a tax bill or other budget processes.
Rosemary, you started your government career at the IRS, which gives you unique perspective on everything we're talking about here, including, by the way, Donald Trump's new pick to run the IRS, which I want to ask you about. But this agency is at the center of so much strife in Washington. Many Republicans wanted to pull back the funding that the Biden administration had given, saying that you'd have armed agents knocking on your doors. Are you concerned about the image, the way the IRS has been framed by people, what is in fact an agency that's woefully underfunded?
I'm not concerned about it because I think that it's a perfect example of where there's inefficiencies and an agency that hasn't run well and hasn't served the taxpayers well. And so I think what President Trump is looking to do is to bring in a fresh set of eyes and to take another look at ways to make that agency more efficient. And again, just automating that agency isn't the answer. We really, need taxpayer services and people to help taxpayers. I think that's where the real frustration is at with Americans.
Well, we do have a name, Billy Long, former congressman from Missouri, named yesterday by Donald Trump to lead the Internal Revenue Service. I'm a little bit confused here, Rosemary. You might think this is a great pick or not, but don't we have an IRS commissioner already?
We do. And he has a 5-year term, and he is confirmed by the Senate. I suspect there will be a lot of pressure for him to leave his position, in which case then, this nomination could move forward.
What can Mr. Long, assuming he gets this job, do then to make the IRS a more efficient agency, one that works better, one that Republicans will not be allergic to?
I think it's about making sure that agents are trained properly, that automation isn't actually running the agency. I think that there is so much that can be done in terms of, again, providing real service to taxpayers and helping people get their questions answered. I feel like time and time again, you're hearing about people getting notices and being frustrated with the process because there's no one that can answer their questions and help them with notices that they receive in the mail. So I do think there's a real opportunity to take a hard look at this agency and make some change.
What do you expect in terms of the tax debate here? And it's funny. We've been talking about tax reform and reforming the tax code, Rosemary, for a lot of years. Remember when it was going to fit on a postcard? What will this debate look like when it comes to extending the Trump tax cuts? And will it include all of the exemptions that he rolled out on the campaign trail? No taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. I could keep going. I haven't even mentioned SALT yet. What will the final product look like?
The final product is probably going to be a combination of extending the 2017 tax cuts, as well as making good on a lot of the campaign promises. And I think what we're also going to see is maybe looking again at different ways to pay for that. Again, whether it's through tariffs or through further cutting government spending. But there's going to be some trade-offs, and it's going to be a really hard process. You're talking about members who are definitely concerned about deficits and debt. And so that's all got to be taken into account during this process.